the archives. Paul, my questions to you relate largely to a company that I once knew as the Recknagel Machine. What's the rest of it?
Recknagel Machine Products.
Incorporated.
Products.
We need, for the record, the historical picture of how the business got started, something of your family, something of the transition from father to son. Just tell me the story that we might have it for the record.
We incorporated in 1946. My father was primarily responsible for that incorporation because I was in Washington at the time, working at the Navy Department. There were about 7 stockholders that put in modest amounts of money, including myself. And about 3 months or so later, I quit my job and came here to be an operating partner with my father.
Your father's name was?
Emil Leonard Recknagel.
Mm-hmm.
He had, as he said himself, he had a lot of background experience in manufacturing products. He was superintendent of Robson Myers when they had local operations making electric fans, motors, and so on. He later was superintendent for Springfield Manufacturing, which made ring gears, starter ring gears for the automotive and truck trade.
Was that a family business too,
Also,
Springfield?
yes.
Who were they?
That was Bill Metz Sr. Ran that business when my father was the superintendent.
As I remember your father, he was a German-born native?
My father was born in the United States.
Oh, he was.
His mother was German, and his 2 sisters were born in Germany. But my grandmother was in this country when my father was born.
Mm-hmm.
He lived in the West End, which is known as the West End Dutch, because there were a lot of German immigrants that located there. And in fact, the church school that he went to was conducted in German. And the church, Zion Lutheran Church, at that time had dual services, one in German and in English, separate services. So my father said he had a lot of experience in manufacturing products, but we bought a small machine shop located in the Shuey Factory building, South Center, now the Yost Air Tool Realty Company building. They had about 3 employees, and they made tools, manufacturing tools, dies, stamping dies, that sort of thing. And we bought the assets of that company. So with 3 employees and very modest equipment, we started in the same quarters in the Shuey building.
This was after the boom of World War II.
Correct. So our primary customers were the 2 concerns in that same building, Yost, Superior, and the Air Tool Company, we did work for both of them. I think our first year sales were about maybe $50,000 in a year.
That's not profit, that's sales.
That's sales. And it was very modest. And my father and I both cut our incomes considerably in order that the thing might go.
Yeah.
In fact, the matter is, during the early couple years, I volunteered to, since I had some expertise in aerodynamics, I volunteered to get a job at Wright Pat during the daytime, and then I could help out evenings with some engineering and so on. But Father suggested that we just struggle along and it'd come out, which it did. And my father was had very good relations with employees all during his life. It was always very warm to have someone meet me on the street and tell me some anecdote that happened when they were employed or working for my father. And
He was an interesting person. I remember Dr. Stoughton, president of Wittenberg,
Yes.
and he got quite friendly.
yes,
They talked German together.
yes.
That's where I got the idea that your father had been born in Germany.
Well, he was within a few months of having been born there.
When was he born? What year? Come on, Paul.
I'll have to furnish that to you. We'll have to insert that in
Yeah.
later. He was about 88 when he died, and my mother was about 92 when she died.
What year did he die? You have to get that one, huh?
Oh, I can't quote that offhand. I doubt if I can be sure about my children's birthdates.
Yeah. What gave you the courage to start up after the boom? The other family businesses in town, were you copying their idea of entrepreneurship?
We were different than those other family-owned businesses because they had a product. Springfield Machine Tool made lathes. Springfield Manufacturing, ring gears. Thompson Grinder made hydraulic surface grinders. So they had products. Mm-hmm. We had no product of our own, but we would make tools and accessories and special devices that those type of people would use to make their product. So we were down the chain a step. We did a lot of work I worked for Thompson Grinder for 4 years after high school and during college. I would thumb my way back and forth to Springfield and check in and work on the drawing board down at Thompson Grinder Company. And Chris Baldenhofer was a very good friend of mine, and so was Bill, and so were Bill and Ralph. They both graduated from Ohio State, and they had sympathy for someone working his way through Ohio State. So they allowed me to work any hours that I cared to work. On the basis of that, I knew their product, and we were able to subcontract parts for them. The same was true of Springfield Machine Tool, although I never worked there. But my father worked there probably when he was about 12 years old. And he'd have to fib about his age because they had a minimum age. It was 13.
Is that?
So he was 13 for a couple of years until, and they had a special platform box so that he could reach the controls on the lathe that he was operating.
There was actually a minimum age of 13?
Yes.
This was state or federal?
I'm not sure.
Uh-huh.
I just know that
I'm amazed.
he remained 13 for a couple of years.
Oh.
So I'd assume from that he went to work at about 11.
Remember, my father went to work at 12.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
So during the years from 1946, I became more active and was named president. And we expanded our customer base. Did a lot of work over in Columbus for different concerns. We moved within the Shuey building twice. As they would expand, they would need this space and we'd move to another space. Finally ended up, we had half of the floor area on the 5th floor. That meant that any equipment that we bought or any equipment we built had to be taken up and down in a freight elevator. And this was quite a drawback. It's one thing to take a box of parts from one floor to another, but if you had to move a machine that might be 7-8 tons, it became quite a burden, and we paid a penalty for not having certain equipment because it couldn't be put on the 5th floor of the building. The floor loading was such that we couldn't. One example was we wanted very desperately to have a boring mill, and we found one at the Steel Products Company for sale, surplus, that was in excellent shape. And we got the building manager's permission. With the floor loading, as Steel Products indicated it would be, that they would allow it on the 5th floor if we build special grillage underneath it to spread the floor load. So we bought the boring mill and had Samuelson riggers. That's Don Samuelson's father.
Mm-hmm.
He went down and looked at the boring mill and came back to me and said they already had it separated, the column from the base, ready to ship. He asked me what they told me it weighed. And I told him the weight that they had quoted. He says, no way. Just by eyeballing it and his years of experience, he said that's almost half again that much. And when they brought it out, he had to go to the city scales, something to do with his license. And the city scales proved him right on the money. And so we had to return it to Steel Products. and they took it back, of course. And all we had to do is pay
Oh,
Samuelson for his time. But that was a disappointment, and that planted a seed that sometime we would have to get out of the shipbuilding. So by that time I had purchased my father's stock and my mother's stock and my older brother's stock and my younger brother's stock. So
what was their names, for the record?
Okay. Paul Recknagel was my older brother, and he was an airline pilot at the time and since retired. Mildred Recknagel, next in line age-wise, my older sister, Mildred, and my younger brother, Richard, who has since died. So ended up that I owned all the stock except for the small number of shares my sister owned. And at that time I began planning to expand by having our own building. And good friend of yours, John, had the ready mix place.
John Coons?
John Coons. I should never forget his name. Very kindly gentleman. Sold me 5 acres plus out on Eagle City Road across from the city waterworks on which to build a new shop building.
When was this?
I'll furnish you the, we can make that an insert. About 1960, roughly. I'll get the exact date. And through the financial help of Lagunda National Bank, I built the building, about 17,000 square feet, and did all the pre-planning of where our machinery would go, and made a one-day move of all machinery and all the men's tools, workbenches, everything in one day's time, utilizing the employees so they didn't have to take any time off. They were working all the time, and they really pitched in, as most employees will do when they have that incentive.
Sure. Samuelson did the moving?
No, we did it ourselves.
That's so.
We had an outside person to help with the major, like the punch press or the large grinders and that sort of thing. But using our employees as their, excuse me.
So you made the move in one day in what year? I'm asking you years again, Paul.
Yes, I'll pinpoint the year, but I think it's about 1960.
Uh-huh. And how many employees did you have at that time? Roughly.
10.
And who were your principal customers? In town or out?
Dollar-wise, it'd be from Columbus, primarily. Metal Forge, it's a division of I'm not sure, but it's owned by someone else, a large supplier to the automotive industry. And Capital Manufacturing, probably the number one customer. They had it's a division of Harsco Industries, and they have about 8 plants throughout the United States. And we did machinery rebuilding, modifications to standard machine tools to make their particular product. Their particular product was fittings, pipe fittings for the oil industry, pumping, drilling equipment. Made a lot of special machines for them, special purpose machines, turning type, lathe type equipment. Sandy Lipson was the vice president of Capital Manufacturing, and he was my primary contact. We both had graduated from Ohio State and in engineering. And he's a very unusual person. He was of Jewish faith. His wife was a cantress in a temple in Columbus, a very fine musician. He was unusual in that you don't find many people of the Jewish faith in the engineering side of manufacturing. Mostly you'll find them in the sales, administration, financial, and so on. And he was just not only unusual from that standpoint, but he was one of the forerunners of people who would draw out of you your best efforts because of the cooperation he would give to you. In other words, he wanted you to succeed because in succeeding you would help him succeed in his work. It's just now developing toward that they know there's got to be a cooperation. Hi, honey. She just got finished swimming. She looks like... Before, in those days, there was always a combative feeling between purchasers of equipment and supplies and so on, and the suppliers. They were always, one trying to beat the other one down in price and so on. Sandy was different. He knew that in the end, you had to make a profit. So he went into the idea that whatever he could do to help you make a profit really helped him in his part of the job. He was a forerunner, honest as the day is long. Just a handshake, and that was all necessary. They had a close enough relationship that they would know if I needed operating cash. For example, if their job was extended over a long period of time, that meant that we had labor in process in our inventory and had to meet our payroll. He would volunteer to have Capital Manufacturing make partial payments.
How nice.
It's just
Like having your own banker.
Exactly. And that fine relationship still exists today. Sandy has, of course, retired and has now dedicated himself to helping at Ohio State. He serves as a volunteer, non-paid consultant in the manufacturing processes laboratory. And in this laboratory, there are a bunch of PhD types who do not have the practical experience that he built up over years. So he really has something to offer them, and they look up to him like a father image.
Yeah.
He's still performing for the benefit of others.
When I interviewed Charlie Brucker, I can never get his name,
Brucker,
concerning the places where he got his employees, trained employees. He was quite laudable toward the JVS school in his community. Granted, he had to do the fine training right in plant. What was your experience? Where did you get your skilled craftsmen?
We also got a few people out of JVS. There were several notable examples of men who could have gone on to engineering school, for example, or so, that came out of JVS, but their talents just weren't, no one encouraged them, I guess, at the time to go on to college, and are now successful in their fields. Take a lot of pride in some of those people who only had the undergraduate, the high school.
Or as they came
JVS
from
training.
there to you and then stepped ahead?
Yes, we were able to encourage them to go ahead and take some further night school work. There are a lot of hidden gems. I don't care at what level you find them in high school, there are a lot of hidden gems there that just need a little polishing.
Did you have any lifetime employees
Oh, yeah.
stayed with you right through their lives?
Oh, yes.
About how many?
We had a number of, I'm just counting while I'm recounting. We were sort of the creative bed that started other tool shops. There was Robert Henson, started Henson Tool and Die. Charlie Sweet, one of our employees right out of high school, that bought Henson Tool and Die, and now it's Sweet Tool and Die. He's since died. See some of the others. Schneider has tool shop out on 68 North, a new building and so on. Mike Schneider came to work for us right out of high school. Good man, doing very well. And so it was good to see these people as entrepreneurs and starting out on their own too. And they always claim that the experience they got with us is what did the job.
I think that's good to have in the record, because I think most people today get the impression that the manufacturers are out for their own gain and to heck with the employees. And I think the disappearance of the family-owned business has had a good deal to do with that impression.
That impression is quite widespread, but I don't know what year it was, but we authorized Ken Rush Sr. to devise a profit-sharing plan for our employees. That was before the day they were popular. And had the usual things in there about vesting, 10-year vesting period. And if an employee left, they were given the vested portion, but the unvested portion, if they hadn't reached 10 years, would be divided among those who did remain. And when that feature was explained to the employees, our superintendent at the time, or general foreman, said that he wouldn't want any of that blood money, an unvested portion not going with the employee, but be really, and that just killed it. We led it up to a vote of the employees, and they said no. So we paid Mr. Rush, and a couple of years later, I just knew in my heart what a good thing it would be for the employees. And so, since it was profit of the corporation, not in a contributory plan by the employee, I just put it into effect. And it was good to hear the employees say afterwards, after they saw the plan and their fund grow, wish they'd started earlier.
It was the same plan that...
Same plan, same plan.
You just had it on the shelf.
But some of those employees, in a few years' time, for example, we had 2 employees from the Thompson Grinder Company when they moved out of town. They went east, and some of the employees didn't care to go, and 2 of them came to work for us. And in about 3 years' time, one of them told me that he had more in his profit-sharing trust fund at Recknagel than he got out of 30 years service at Thompson Grinder in their pension system.
Wow.
So the plan was successful. When I sold the business, though, about 8 years ago, Jim Thompson, the new owner, wanted to have the opportunity to start his own system. So we distributed all funds in that profit-sharing trust fund, with the hopes that the employee would roll it over into an IRA so they wouldn't pay tax on the whole thing. It would be delayed until they did retire. Unfortunately, that wasn't the case most of the employees. And they paid taxes on it and bought a motorboat or another car or something. It was just but there were some nice distributions.
During your time, what was the highest hourly rate that was paid?
Maybe $12 an hour.
What do you suppose that would be currently?
Well, I'm not privy to the thing exactly, but I would say $15, $16 in the 6 years since I've been,
Yeah.
6 or 8 years since I've been out.
The man who bought the business is still running the business?
Yes. He was my, I advertised in the Wall Street Journal for a person who had a certain background, who was interested in an equity position if he proved out to be the right person. And I had 100 and some resumes. It was at the time, very early, when corporations were downsizing, retracting, and it left a lot of vice presidents and general managers looking for work. And Jim Thompson was the end product of that 100 and some resumes.
Where did he come from?
St. Louis. And he proved to be a good choice in that he had had practical experience. He had gone through an extremely good apprenticeship program. Parker Penn. They had an outstanding program, and he had worked his way up in the industries until he became a vice president in charge of all capital equipment purchases for their various plants throughout the world, some of them in Europe. Came to work for us, and he worked for me as a person employed for 2 years.
Oh.
At which time we negotiated for a purchase. And the first round was just for the assets of the company, the equipment, customer list, small tools, material, and so on. Just the assets, but not the building. And in negotiations again with Legenda Bank, financing him, he went along about 2 years and made a proposal to buy the building. He was that successful early on, like I knew he would be, because we had a good basis. And he has increased the sales from in this 6 or 8 years from just over $1 million to approximately $4 million today.
Man.
And,
It's obvious that you're quite pleased with his progress.
oh, sure, sure. He married his wife Barbara after he took the position here, and she came with him and runs his office. She's very capable, computer technology going on, and all their office operations are on computer, payroll, et cetera, purchasing. She runs that part of it. He's the very successful outside contact for new customers. They've expanded their customer base. Whereas we struggled in our new building to get our first boring mill that we failed to get while we were in the Shoei building, he now has 2 boring mills and a lot of numerical control equipment. The technology is moving very fast, and he is of the age that has moved along with that progress.
He's changed the name, hasn't he?
He changed it immediately so that
To what?
He changed it to True Line.
True Line.
It made the separation of the business during the transition easier. Sure. Because their invoices would go out with a different name. Our accounts receivable that we still had would come in under Recknagel. Mm-hmm. That and it just gave him a fresh start. It was his business then. That's proven very successful.
We just have a brief time on the end of this tape. Are you happy with the fact that you've retired?
I am. I thought there might be some problem, but it seems like the problem never came up.
I've had the same experience.
I think we get busier and busier with maybe smaller things.
Sure.
Not as earth-shaking as meeting a payroll, maybe.
Yeah.
But
things that are good for the community.
yes.
Yeah,
Yes.
that's what counts. Well, Paul, I appreciate very much this interview. When I get the transcription made, which often takes quite a while,
Sure.
I'll bring it back for you to insert whatever you
I'll put
like.
in specific dates or names that I missed giving you during this interview.